I stood in my living room staring at the certified letter from the Meadowbrook Homeowners Association, my hands trembling with disbelief as I read the words demanding I remove all excess insulation from my attic within 30 days or face daily fines of $500. My name is Quinton, and I had purchased my townhouse in Meadowbrook, a planned community just outside Charlotte, North Carolina, about 18 months ago. The place was perfect for me as a single guy working remotely as a software developer. I had never dealt with an HOA before, and honestly, the first year had been pretty quiet. I paid my dues, kept my grass trimmed, and painted my front door an approved shade of forest green. Everything seemed fine until last Tuesday, when I decided to upgrade my attic insulation to save on energy costs. The letter was signed by Patricia Hendricks, the HOA president, a woman I had only met once during a neighborhood barbecue. She had given me an overly firm handshake and immediately launched into a lecture about properly disposing of yard waste. I should have seen the warning signs then. I reread the letter 3 times, each pass making me angrier. Apparently, Patricia had conducted what she called a routine inspection of my property while I was out grocery shopping. How she gained access to my attic was still a mystery, but she claimed my recently installed blown-in cellulose insulation exceeded the approved weight capacity for attic spaces in our development and posed a structural hazard to neighboring units. The thing is, I had done my homework. Before hiring Johnson's insulation services, I had consulted with a structural engineer named Dr. Raymond Martinez to ensure my townhouse could handle the additional weight. Dr. Martinez had given me a detailed report stating that not only could my attic support the insulation, but that the original builders had actually under-insulated the entire development, likely to cut costs. He had even pointed out that proper insulation would help preserve the roof structure by preventing ice damming and moisture issues. I picked up my phone and called the number listed on the HOA letterhead. A cheerful voice answered after 2 rings. Meadowbrook HOA, this is Brenda speaking. Hi Brenda, this is Quinton from 342 Willow Creek Lane. I received a letter today about my attic insulation and I need to speak with Patricia Hendricks. Oh, the cheerfulness evaporated from Brenda's voice. Let me see if she's available. Can you hold? Elevator music played for what felt like an eternity before Patricia's sharp voice cut through the line. Mr. Quinton, I assume you received our notice. I did, and I need to explain that this insulation was professionally installed after consulting with a structural engineer. I have documentation proving it's completely safe. Mr. Quinton, Patricia said, her voice dripping with condescension, I have been the president of this HOA for 7 years. I think I know what is and isn't safe for our community. The covenants clearly state that no structural modifications can be made without HOA approval. Adding insulation isn't a structural modification, it's routine home maintenance. That's your interpretation. Our interpretation is different. You have 30 days to remove the insulation and restore the attic to its original condition, or you will face daily fines. Those fines will become a lien on your property if left unpaid. My jaw clenched. This is ridiculous. I'm not removing properly installed insulation that's saving me money and protecting my home. Then you'll be hearing from our attorney. Good day, Mr. Quinton. The line went dead. I stood there holding my phone, rage bubbling in my chest. This was insane. I had spent $3,000 on that insulation, and now some power-hungry HOA president wanted me to rip it all out based on nothing but her own arbitrary decision. I spent the rest of the evening researching HOA law in North Carolina. What I found wasn't encouraging. HOAs had broad powers to enforce their covenants, and fighting them often meant expensive legal battles. However, I also discovered that HOAs had a legal obligation to act reasonably and in good faith. Demanding the removal of professionally installed insulation without any engineering evidence of danger seemed like neither. The next morning, I called Dr. Martinez and explained the situation. He sounded genuinely concerned. "Derek, removing that insulation would be a terrible idea. Let me tell you something I noticed during my inspection that I didn't include in my report because it wasn't directly relevant to your question about insulation weight." "What's that?" "Your townhouse shares a common roof truss system with the units on either side of you. It's not uncommon in developments like yours. The builder used what's called a continuous truss design to save money. The problem is, your unit sits in the middle of a 3-unit section, and the way the loads are distributed, your attic insulation is actually helping to stabilize the entire roof system." My stomach dropped. "What do you mean stabilize?" "The insulation provides thermal mass and helps prevent differential expansion and contraction of the roof materials. More importantly, the weight distribution helps keep the truss system balanced. Your neighbors on both sides have minimal insulation, which I suspect is why you've been experiencing better structural integrity than they have. If you remove your insulation, you'll create an imbalance in the load distribution." "How bad are we talking?" Dr. Martinez paused. "Potentially catastrophic. The shared truss system is already showing signs of stress. I noticed some minor sagging when I was up there. Your insulation is actually helping to counterbalance weight distribution issues caused by poor original construction and your neighbor's lack of proper attic maintenance. Remove it, and you could trigger a progressive collapse of the entire roof section." Jesus Christ. "I can write you a detailed report explaining all of this, but Derek, you need to make the HOA understand they're playing with fire here. This isn't about rules and regulations. This is about basic structural engineering. Can you have that report ready by tomorrow?" "I'll have it to you by this evening." True to his word, Dr. Martinez emailed me a comprehensive 20-page engineering report by 6 o'clock that night. I printed it out and read through every word. The technical language was dense, but the conclusions were crystal clear. Removing my attic insulation would likely cause the shared roof truss system to fail, potentially causing tens of thousands of dollars in damage and possibly injuring people if anyone was in the affected attics when the collapse occurred. I called Patricia's number again the next morning. Brenda answered with the same forced cheerfulness. "Meadowbrook HOA, this is Brenda." "Brenda, it's Derek Quinton again. I have an engineering report that Patricia needs to see immediately. It's about the insulation issue and it's urgent." "I can have her call you back." "No, I need to meet with her in person today. This is a safety issue that affects multiple units." Brenda's voice dropped to a whisper. "Mr. Quinton, between you and me, Patricia doesn't like to be contradicted. If you have a report that disagrees with her, she's going to dig in harder. I appreciate the warning, but this is about preventing a roof collapse. Can you please set up a meeting?" "I'll try. Hold on." This time the hold music only lasted 2 minutes. "Mr. Quinton," Patricia's voice was ice cold. "Brenda says you have some kind of report. Email it to the HOA address and we'll review it at our next board meeting in 3 weeks. "Patricia, this can't wait 3 weeks. I have an engineering report from a licensed structural engineer stating that removing my insulation could cause the shared roof truss to collapse. This affects units 340, 342, and 344 Willow Creek Lane. That's ridiculous fear-mongering, Mr. Quinton. I've lived in this development for 12 years, and we've never had a roof collapse. Have you ever had someone properly insulate their attic before? That's beside the point. The rules are the rules. The rules don't override basic physics and engineering. I'm coming to your office in 1 hour with this report. If you refuse to read it and something happens to that roof, the liability will fall squarely on the HOA. I heard her sharp intake of breath. Are you threatening me? I'm trying to prevent a disaster. 1 hour, Patricia, please. I hung up before she could refuse and grabbed my keys. The HOA office was located in a small building near the community pool, about a 10-minute drive from my townhouse. I arrived to find Patricia standing outside, arms crossed, her perfectly styled blonde hair not moving in the breeze. She was probably in her mid-50s, wearing a cream-colored pantsuit that screamed suburban authority figure. "You have 15 minutes," she said without preamble. "I have a meeting with the landscaping committee at 11. I handed her the report. "Please, just read the executive summary on page 2. Patricia took the report like it might be contaminated and flipped to the second page. Her eyes scanned the text, and I watched her expression shift from irritation to confusion to something that might have been concern. "This engineer is claiming our roof could collapse. He's saying the shared truss system is already under stress from poor original construction. My insulation is helping to balance the load distribution. Removing it would create an imbalance that could trigger a failure. Why would the builder create such a flawed design? To save money. It's not illegal, just cheap. The system works as long as it's maintained properly and load distribution stays balanced." Patricia looked up from the report, and for the first time, I saw actual worry in her eyes. "The couple in 340, the Martins, they have a nursery in one of their upstairs bedrooms, right under the attic. Then you understand why this is urgent." She flipped through more pages of the report, her lips pressed into a thin line. "I need to consult with our HOA attorney. This is beyond my expertise." "That's fine, but in the meantime, you need to withdraw the demand to remove my insulation." Patricia's eyes hardened again. "I'll do no such thing. For all I know, you paid this engineer to write a false report to get out of compliance." "Dr. Martinez is a licensed professional engineer with 20 years of experience. He has no reason to lie, and he could lose his license for filing a fraudulent report. I'll have our attorney look into this. Until then, the order stands. You have 27 days remaining." She thrust the report back at me and walked into the HOA office, slamming the door behind her. I stood there in the parking lot, stunned by her stubborn refusal to acknowledge the danger. This woman was going to get someone hurt or worse because she couldn't admit she might be wrong. I drove home and immediately called a lawyer. After 3 referrals, I ended up on the phone with Marcus Webb, an attorney who specialized in HOA disputes. "Mr. Quinton," Marcus said after I explained the situation, "you're in a difficult position. Legally, the HOA has broad authority to enforce their covenants. However, they also have a duty of care to all residents. If you have engineering evidence that their order would create a safety hazard, that changes things. So what do I do? First, send the HOA a formal letter via certified mail outlining the danger and explicitly stating that you will not comply with their order due to safety concerns. Make sure you reference Dr. Martinez's report and attach a copy. This creates a paper trail showing you tried to warn them. And then we wait. If they try to fine you or take action, we file for an injunction. We'll argue that their order is arbitrary, capricious, and dangerous. A judge will likely side with you, especially with that engineering report. What about the roof? What if it actually collapses?" Marcus was quiet for a moment. If the HOA knows about the danger and proceeds anyway, they would be liable for any damages. But Derek, I have to ask, is this engineer absolutely certain about the collapse risk? He said potentially catastrophic and likely to cause failure. That sounds pretty certain to me. Then we need to protect you legally and make sure the HOA can't claim they weren't warned. Send that letter today. I spent the next 2 hours drafting and redrafting the letter. I kept the language professional but firm, clearly stating that I would not remove the insulation due to the safety risk, that I had engineering evidence supporting my position, and that the HOA would be liable for any damages if they forced compliance. I attached Dr. Martinez's full report and sent everything via certified mail and email. 3 days later, I received the HOA's response. It was from their attorney, a man named Gerald Fisk. The letter was 2 pages of legal threats, stating that my refusal to comply constituted a breach of the covenants, that the HOA rejected the findings of my hired engineer, and that daily fines would begin in 24 days as originally stated. The letter also informed me that the HOA had hired their own engineer to inspect the roof system, and that his findings contradicted Dr. Martinez's report. I called Marcus immediately. They hired their own engineer, and he says everything is fine. Of course he did, Marcus said, not sounding surprised. Email me their report if they sent it. They didn't. The letter just says their engineer disagreed with mine. That's interesting. They're legally required to provide you with any evidence they're using against you. Let me send Mr. Fisk a discovery request. Over the next 2 weeks, things escalated rapidly. Marcus filed the discovery request, which Gerald Fisk fought, claiming the HOA's engineering report was internal documentation not subject to disclosure. Marcus then filed a motion to compel, arguing that if the HOA was using the report to justify their enforcement action, I had a right to see it. While the lawyers battled, I started noticing concerning signs. One morning, I was up in my attic checking some network cables when I heard a loud crack from somewhere in the roof structure. It wasn't a normal, settling noise. It sounded like wood under stress. I immediately called Dr. Martinez. Can you come back out and do another inspection? When? Today, if possible. I'm hearing noises that worry me. Dr. Martinez arrived that afternoon with more equipment than his first visit. He spent 2 hours in my attic and another hour in the shared spaces between the units. When he came down, his face was grim. Derek, the situation has deteriorated faster than I expected. I'm seeing new stress cracks in 3 of the main truss members. The sagging has increased by almost an inch since my last visit. What does that mean? It means the roof is failing. Not immediately, but the process has started. If you remove your insulation now, the sudden change in load distribution could be the trigger that brings the whole thing down. But if I leave it in place, then we have time. Maybe months, maybe a year. The structure needs professional reinforcement, but that takes planning and money. Ripping out your insulation would be like kicking out a support beam. I need you to document all of this. I already am. I'm writing an updated report tonight, and Derek, I'm going to recommend that the HOA evacuate all 3 units until proper reinforcement can be installed. My blood ran cold. Evacuate. The risk is real. I can't in good conscience tell you it's safe to live there knowing what I know. Will you tell the HOA I'm required to report dangerous conditions? I'll be sending my report to them, to you, and to the city building inspector. 3 days later, all hell broke loose. The building inspector, a thorough woman named Carol Jensen, showed up at my door at 8 in the morning with a clipboard and a serious expression. Mr. Quinton, I received an engineering report from Dr. Raymond Martinez regarding your roof structure. I need to conduct my own inspection. Of course. Come in. Carol spent 4 hours examining all 3 affected townhouses. The Martins in Unit 340 were understandably terrified. Susan Martin was 7 months pregnant, and the thought of their roof collapsing was nightmare fuel. The couple in Unit 344, elderly retirees named Harold and Joyce Thompson, seemed more confused than scared. When Carol finished her inspection, she gathered all of us in my living room. Patricia had also shown up, looking furious. "I've completed my assessment," Carol began, "and I concur with Dr. Martinez's findings. The shared roof truss system is showing signs of structural failure. The stress fractures and sagging are beyond normal settling. I'm issuing a repair order to the HOA requiring immediate remediation." "This is absurd," Patricia snapped. "We had our own engineer look at it and he said everything was fine." "Then I need to see that report, because what I'm looking at is not fine." "Our engineer's findings are confidential." Carol's expression hardened. "Mrs. Hendricks, I'm a city building inspector. If you have an engineering report relevant to a safety issue, it's not confidential from me. Provide it by tomorrow morning or I'll assume it doesn't exist." Patricia's face turned red. "You can't talk to me that way. I'll have the city manager hear about this." "Feel free. In the meantime, I'm recommending that residents of these 3 units stay with friends or family until repairs are completed. This isn't a mandatory evacuation yet, but I'm strongly advising it for safety." Susan Martin started crying. Her husband, Tom, put his arm around her. "Where are we supposed to go? We don't have family in Charlotte." "I'm sorry," Carol said, "but your safety comes first." After Carol left, Patricia turned on me. "This is your fault. If you had just followed the rules, none of this would have happened." I stared at her in disbelief. "Are you serious right now? My insulation is the only thing holding that roof up. This is because the builder cut corners and the HOA never properly maintained the structure. We maintain everything perfectly. You added weight that the roof couldn't handle." The engineer said the opposite. "The roof was already failing and my insulation is helping." "I don't believe that. I think you damaged the roof somehow and now you're trying to blame it on the HOA." Harold Thompson, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. "Patricia, with all due respect, that doesn't make any sense. Derek's insulation went in a month ago. These problems have been developing for years." "Stay out of this, Harold." "I won't stay out of it. My wife and I could be hurt if that roof comes down. I want to know what the HOA is going to do to fix it." Patricia pulled herself up to her full height. "The HOA will handle this appropriately. We'll have the roof inspected by a reputable engineer, not some hired gun trying to drum up business." "Dr. Martinez is reputable," I said, and the city inspector agreed with him. "The city inspector is overreacting. I've lived here for 12 years and this roof is fine." "Then why won't you show anyone your engineer's report?" Tom Martin asked. Patricia's jaw clenched. "That's HOA business. Now I suggest everyone go back to their homes and stop panicking over nothing." She left, and the rest of us stood in my living room looking at each other. "I'm taking my wife to a hotel tonight," Tom said quietly. "I'm not risking our baby." "That's smart," I replied. "Susan, Tom, I'm really sorry about all this." "It's not your fault," Susan said, wiping her eyes. "Patricia is the one being unreasonable." The Thompsons decided to stay with their daughter across town. I considered leaving too, but decided to stay put. If the roof was going to collapse, it would probably give more warning signs first. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak and groan of the house made me jump. Around 3 in the morning, I heard another loud crack from above. I grabbed my phone and recorded a voice memo documenting the sound, the time, and my concerns. If this ended up in court, I wanted evidence of everything. The next day, Carol Jensen called me. "Mr. Quinton, I followed up with the HOA about their engineering report. It doesn't exist." "What? They never hired an engineer. Patricia made it up." I felt rage boil up inside me. She lied about having an engineering report. It appears so. Her attorney, Mr. Fisk, claims there was a miscommunication and that they had planned to hire an engineer but never got around to it. That's not a miscommunication, that's fraud. She used a fake report to justify ignoring a legitimate safety concern. I agree, and I've informed the city attorney. There may be legal ramifications for the HOA. In the meantime, I'm escalating this to a mandatory evacuation order. All 3 units need to be empty by this weekend. How long until the repairs can be done? That depends on the HOA acting quickly. They need to hire a structural engineering firm to design a reinforcement plan, then get contractors to do the work. We're talking weeks at minimum, possibly months. And what are we supposed to do? Just pay for hotels indefinitely? The HOA should be covering your relocation costs. This is their responsibility. I called Marcus Webb and filled him in on everything. He was quiet for a long moment after I finished. "Derek, this has gone beyond a simple HOA dispute. The HOA president lied about having an engineering report to justify an order that could have caused a catastrophic structural failure. People could have died. So what happens now? Now we go on the offensive. I'm filing a lawsuit against the HOA for negligence, fraud, and breach of their duty of care. We're also going to seek an emergency court order requiring them to immediately fund repairs and cover all relocation costs for affected residents. Will that work? Given the circumstances, I think a judge will be very sympathetic. The building inspector's report and Dr. Martinez's findings give us strong evidence. The mandatory evacuation order came through that Friday. I packed a bag and checked into a Hampton Inn near the airport. The HOA sent an email to all residents explaining that there were minor structural concerns that required routine maintenance, and that the affected units would be temporarily relocated at HOA expense. No mention of Patricia's lies or the severity of the situation. Marcus filed our lawsuit the following Monday. The complaint was 30 pages long and detailed every interaction, every warning ignored, every lie told. We named both the HOA and Patricia Hendricks personally as defendants. We also named Gerald Fisk, the HOA attorney, for his role in fighting the discovery request and making false statements about the engineering report. The local news picked up the story 2 days later. A reporter named Jennifer Lawson from WCNC Charlotte called me for an interview. I agreed, figuring public pressure might help force the HOA to act. The interview aired on the 6 o'clock news. Jennifer did a good job laying out the facts. Homeowner installs insulation. HOA demands removal. Engineer warns of roof collapse. HOA lies about having their own engineer. City orders evacuation. The story painted Patricia and the HOA in a terrible light. My phone started ringing immediately. Other Meadowbrook residents wanted to know what was happening. Some were supportive. Others blamed me for causing trouble. One woman, Karen Hallbrook, who lived 3 streets over, left me an angry voicemail saying I was destroying property values by talking to the media. The next HOA board meeting was scheduled for Thursday evening. Marcus advised me to attend. They have to let you speak during the homeowner comment period. I want you to formally present all of our evidence and demand action. The meeting was held in the community center, and the parking lot was packed when I arrived. Apparently, The news coverage had gotten everyone's attention. Inside, about 80 people filled the chairs, and Patricia sat at the front table with the other board members looking like she wanted to be anywhere else. The meeting started with routine business, approving the minutes from the last meeting, discussing landscaping contracts, reviewing the budget. Finally, Patricia opened the floor to homeowner comments. I stood up, and every eye in the room turned to me. My name is Quinton, and I'm the homeowner at the center of the roof structure issue on Willow Creek Lane. I want to make sure everyone understands what happened here. I spent 15 minutes walking through the timeline. I explained about installing insulation, Dr. Martinez's initial and follow-up reports, Patricia's fake engineering report, the building inspector's findings, and the mandatory evacuation. I kept my voice calm and factual, letting the facts speak for themselves. When I finished, the room was silent. Then Harold Thompson stood up. I'm one of the evacuated homeowners, and I want to know why Patricia lied about having an engineer look at our roof. My wife and I could have been killed. Patricia's face flushed. I did not lie. There was a miscommunication with our engineer's schedule. That's not what the building inspector says, I replied. She says you never hired an engineer at all. The building inspector is mistaken. A man I didn't recognize stood up. I'm Charles Peterson, and I've been on this HOA board for 4 years. Patricia, I've seen the correspondence. We never hired an engineer. You told us you had everything under control. Patricia's eyes flashed with anger. Charles, this is not the time or place to air internal board discussions. Actually, it is, Charles said. These are our neighbors who got displaced because you refused to listen to legitimate safety concerns. You need to take responsibility. The meeting devolved into chaos after that. Homeowners started shouting questions. Board members argued with each other. Patricia kept banging her gavel and demanding order, but no one was listening anymore. Finally, another board member, a quiet man named Robert Chen, spoke up. I'm calling for an emergency vote to remove Patricia as president. You can't do that, Patricia said. Actually, according to our bylaws, any board member can call for a vote to remove an officer for cause. Lying about an engineering report and putting residents at risk is definitely cause. The vote was 4-1, with Patricia casting the only vote against. She was out as president, effective immediately. Robert Chen was appointed interim president, and his first act was to apologize to everyone affected and promise immediate action on repairs. I left the meeting feeling vindicated but exhausted. This whole nightmare had consumed my life for weeks, and we still didn't have a repaired roof. True to his word, Robert moved quickly. Within 3 days, the HOA had hired Wilson Structural Engineering to assess the roof and design a reinforcement plan. The lead engineer, a woman named Dr. Elizabeth Park, confirmed everything Dr. Martinez had said. The shared truss system was poorly designed, inadequately maintained, and currently in the early stages of failure. She estimated the repair cost at $75,000. The HOA held an emergency special assessment vote, but enough homeowners were angry about Patricia's mismanagement that they voted to use the reserve fund instead. Repairs began 2 weeks later. The contractors installed additional support beams, replaced damaged truss members, and redistributed the roof loads to eliminate the stress points. Dr. Park supervised the entire process. She also confirmed that my insulation had indeed been helping to stabilize the structure, and that removing it would have been disastrous. Meanwhile, my lawsuit moved forward. Gerald Fisk tried to get it dismissed, arguing that the HOA had immunity for good faith governance decisions. Marcus countered that lying about engineering reports was not good faith, and that Patricia's actions went beyond mere negligence into willful misconduct. The judge agreed with Marcus. Not only did she deny the motion to dismiss, but she also ordered the HOA to pay my legal fees to date, which were already approaching $15,000. Patricia hired her own attorney to defend against her personal liability, but the evidence against her was overwhelming. 2 months after the evacuation, the roof repairs were completed and we were allowed to move back in. My insulation remained in place, now officially blessed by both the HOA and the city. The Martins moved back 3 weeks before Susan's due date. The Thompsons were just happy to be home. Patricia resigned from the HOA entirely and put her house up for sale. The word around the neighborhood was that she couldn't handle the shame of what had happened. Karen Hallbrook, who had blamed me for causing trouble, actually apologized when she learned the full story. Apparently, she had only heard Patricia's version of events initially. The lawsuit settled 6 months later. The HOA paid me $50,000 for the stress, displacement costs, and vindication of my position. Patricia personally paid another $25,000 from her homeowner's insurance. Gerald Fisk faced a bar complaint for his role in hiding evidence, though I heard he accepted a reprimand rather than fight it. More importantly, the settlement included a provision requiring the HOA to conduct professional structural inspections of all buildings in the community every 3 years. Dr. Martinez was hired to do the first round of inspections, and he found problems in 2 other buildings that needed attention. The HOA, under Robert Chen's leadership, addressed those issues proactively. I also successfully pushed for a change to the HOA bylaws requiring board approval for any enforcement action that contradicted engineering or professional advice. No more arbitrary decisions from power-hungry board members. The whole experience taught me several valuable lessons about HOAs, property ownership, and standing up for yourself when you know you're right. It would have been easier to just comply with Patricia's initial order, but doing so might have killed someone. The Martins' baby, a healthy girl named Emma, came into the world in a safe home with a solid roof overhead because I refused to back down. Looking back, the most frustrating part wasn't the conflict itself, but Patricia's stubborn refusal to admit she might be wrong. Her ego nearly caused a catastrophic failure that could have injured or killed multiple people. When someone presents you with legitimate engineering evidence of danger, the only reasonable response is to stop and listen, not double down on your position. These days, the Meadowbrook HOA is much more reasonable. Robert Chen proved to be an excellent president, focused on actual community maintenance rather than petty rule enforcement. He implemented a transparent decision-making process and required board votes for any enforcement action over a certain threshold. The community is better for it. I still live in my townhouse, and my energy bills are wonderfully low thanks to that insulation. Every time I hear my furnace kick on less frequently than my neighbors, I'm reminded of the fight I had to wage to keep it. Tom Martin jokes that Emma's first word should be insulation, given how much it featured in her parents' lives before she was born. The most satisfying moment came about a year after everything settled. I ran into Patricia at a grocery store in a neighboring town. She looked away and tried to avoid me, but I walked up to her anyway. "Patricia." She stopped and turned, her expression guarded. "Derek, I just want you to know that I never wanted any of this. If you had just listened to the engineer from the beginning, none of it would have happened." She was quiet for a moment, then nodded slightly. "I know. I let my pride get in the way of common sense. It's something I have to live with." It wasn't exactly an apology, but it was acknowledgement, which was more than I expected. We parted ways, and I haven't seen her since. The experience also led me to become more involved in HOA governance. I joined the Architectural Review Committee, where I push for evidence-based decision-making and professional consultation when needed. It's boring work, mostly reviewing paint color requests and fence proposals, but it's important. Someone needs to be the voice of reason to prevent another Patricia situation. The structural engineering profession also benefited from the case, oddly enough. Dr. Martinez told me that he's seen an uptick in HOAs requesting professional assessments before making enforcement decisions. Our case became something of a cautionary tale in the industry about what happens when you ignore engineering advice. Several other homeowners in Meadowbrook have since upgraded their insulation, inspired by my energy savings and the validation that proper insulation helps rather than hurts structural integrity. The HOA now has streamlined approval for insulation upgrades, as long as homeowners provide basic documentation that the work was done professionally. I've also been contacted by homeowners in other developments facing similar HOA overreach. While I'm not a lawyer and can't give legal advice, I share my experience and encourage people to document everything, get professional opinions, and stand their ground when they're right. Too many people cave to HOA pressure even when the HOA is clearly wrong, and that just encourages more bad behavior. The Thompsons became good friends through all of this. Harold and I meet for coffee every few weeks, and his wife Joyce makes excellent cookies that she brings over occasionally. They're talking about selling their townhouse and moving to a single-family home with no HOA, which I completely understand. Once you've been through an experience like ours, the appeal of HOA living diminishes significantly. The Martins stayed but are watching their property values carefully. Tom told me that he's documenting everything the HOA does, just in case. The experience made him hyper-vigilant about potential problems. I can't blame him. When you've been threatened with daily fines for protecting your home, and then faced evacuation because of structural problems the HOA should have caught years ago, trust doesn't come easily. As for me, I'm cautiously optimistic about the future. The HOA is well managed now, the roof is solid, and my home is comfortable and energy efficient. I've learned to navigate the politics of community living and to fight for what's right even when it's exhausting and expensive. Would I buy in an HOA community again? Probably not. The loss of autonomy and the risk of unreasonable board members just isn't worth it. But since I'm here, I'm determined to make it work and to ensure that what happened to me doesn't happen to anyone else. The legal settlement money went partly into my emergency fund and partly into upgrading other aspects of my home. I installed solar panels, which the HOA approved without incident under Robert's leadership. I also put in a new HVAC system that works beautifully with my insulation to keep my energy costs ridiculously low. Every year around the anniversary of the evacuation, the 3 affected families have dinner together. It's our way of marking the experience and celebrating that we all made it through safely. Last year, Emma took her first steps during our dinner, which felt symbolic somehow. New beginnings and all that. The story occasionally gets brought up in neighborhood gatherings, usually by newer residents who heard about it secondhand. It's become part of Meadowbrook lore. The time the HOA president nearly caused a roof collapse because she refused to listen to an engineer. Some people find it amusing in retrospect. Those of us who lived through it know better. I did eventually get a sincere apology, though not from Patricia. It came from Brenda, the HOA administrative assistant, who sent me a heartfelt letter explaining that she had tried to warn Patricia multiple times about the insulation issue but was ignored. She felt guilty for not doing more, though I assured her that she bore no responsibility. She was just an employee following orders. The fault lay entirely with Patricia's hubris and stubbornness. Brenda still works for the HOA, and she's been a valuable ally in implementing the reforms Robert pushed through. She has a better sense than most board members of what's reasonable and what's overreach, probably from having watched Patricia's reign of petty tyranny for so many years. The incident also sparked conversations in the broader Charlotte area about HOA oversight and accountability. A local council member proposed legislation requiring HOAs to carry higher liability insurance and to submit to binding arbitration for disputes involving safety concerns. The proposal is still being debated, but the fact that it's even on the table shows how much attention our case attracted. Dr. Martinez and I stay in touch. He uses our case as a teaching example when he lectures at the University of North Carolina Charlotte Engineering Program. His point is that engineers have an ethical obligation to speak up about safety issues, even when clients or third parties don't want to hear it. Standing up to Patricia's pressure and filing reports with the city inspector, even knowing it would create conflict, was the right thing to do. I framed Dr. Martinez's original engineering report and hung it in my home office. It's a reminder that expertise matters, that professionals exist for a reason, and that ignoring them can have catastrophic consequences. Whenever I'm faced with a decision where I'm not qualified to judge, I look at that frame and remember to consult someone who actually knows what they're talking about. The whole experience fundamentally changed how I think about homeownership and community living. I used to think HOAs were just about keeping neighborhoods tidy and property values stable. Now I understand they're power structures that can be used for good or ill, depending on who's in charge. The difference between Patricia's board and Robert's board is night and day, yet they govern the same community under the same bylaws. The personalities matter more than the rules. I'm more politically active now, not just in the HOA but in local government generally. I attend city council meetings occasionally and vote in every election, even the small ones. The Patricia experience taught me that civic engagement matters and that bad leadership can have real consequences for real people. My career actually benefited from the whole ordeal in an unexpected way. The attention to detail and documentation skills I developed while fighting the HOA translated well to my software development work. I'm better at tracking changes, maintaining records, and communicating complex technical issues to non-technical stakeholders. My boss even commented on the improvement, though I didn't tell him it came from an HOA battle. Some nights, usually when I'm up late working, I still hear the house settling and creak sounds from the roof. But now I know they're normal sounds from a properly supported structure, not warning signs of impending collapse. The repairs really were comprehensive, and Dr. Park's engineering was solid. We're safe here. That safety came at a cost, though, not just financially but emotionally and socially. Relationships in the neighborhood were strained for months after the lawsuit became public. Some people sided with Patricia, viewing me as a troublemaker who should have just followed the rules. Others supported me but didn't want to get involved. Only a handful really stood up publicly, and I remember who they were. Those supporters became the core of a reform movement within the HOA. We worked together to change the culture from one of rigid rule enforcement to one of reasonable governance. It's an ongoing process, and we still face resistance from the old guard occasionally, but progress is being made. The financial impact on the HOA was significant. Between the legal fees, settlement payments, repair costs, and relocation expenses, the association spent over $200,000 dealing with the consequences of Patricia's decisions. That money could have funded years of community improvements. Instead, it went to cleaning up a mess that never should have happened. Some homeowners pushed for the HOA to sue Patricia personally to recover the costs, but Robert argued against it. His position was that Patricia had already paid a price through her personal settlement with me, her resignation, and her reputation damage. Further litigation would just cost more money with no guarantee of recovery. I agreed with him, though part of me wanted to see Patricia held fully accountable. The insurance companies got involved too, of course. The HOA's liability insurer initially tried to deny coverage, arguing that Patricia's actions were intentional misconduct not covered by the policy. Marcus helped the HOA fight that battle, ironically enough, because if the insurer didn't pay, the HOA would have to cover everything from the reserve fund, which would hurt all homeowners. Eventually, the insurer settled and paid most of the claims. Looking back now, almost 2 years after it all started, I can see how much has changed. The physical roof is stronger than ever. The HOA governance is more transparent and reasonable. The community is more aware of structural issues and proactive about maintenance. And I'm more confident in standing up for myself when I know I'm right. But some things didn't change. The development is still full of shared infrastructure that creates interdependencies between neighbors. The HOA still has broad powers that can be abused by the wrong people. And human nature still inclines some people toward petty authority and others toward conflict avoidance, neither of which leads to good governance. Emma Martin is walking now and talking in short sentences. Susan and Tom are considering having another child, now that they feel secure in their home again. Harold Thompson is teaching me chess, which he's been playing for 50 years. Joy still makes those incredible cookies. These relationships, forged in crisis, have become some of my most valued friendships. The contractors who did the roof work actually gave me a discount on some other repairs I needed, impressed by how I had handled the situation. They said most homeowners would have caved to HOA pressure, potentially causing a disaster, and they respected that I stood firm. It's nice to be respected by people whose opinions I value. I've told this story at parties a few times, and people's reactions are always interesting. Some are shocked that an HOA could be so unreasonable. Others nod knowingly, having their own HOA horror stories. A few always say they'd never buy in an HOA community, though they usually already live in one and just haven't had problems yet. Everyone agrees Patricia was in the wrong, but opinions vary on how I handled it. Some think I should have been more diplomatic or tried harder to work with Patricia before lawyering up and going to the media. Others think I was too patient and should have taken legal action sooner. In hindsight, I think my timing was about right. I gave Patricia multiple chances to do the right thing, documented her refusals, and then took decisive action when the building inspector confirmed the danger. Could I have handled some conversations better? Probably. But the overall strategy was sound. The one thing I'd change if I could do it over would be to involve other affected homeowners earlier. The Martins and Thompsons were allies, but they came to that position through their own process. If I had actively recruited them to present a united front from the beginning, Patricia might have backed down sooner. Then again, she might have just doubled down harder. It's impossible to know. What I do know is that standing up to Patricia, despite the stress and cost, was the right thing to do. Not just for me, but for everyone in those 3 townhouses and everyone in the community who benefited from the subsequent reforms. Sometimes doing the right thing is hard and messy and expensive, but it's still right. My attic insulation sits there quietly, doing its job of keeping my home comfortable and energy efficient. It helped prevent a roof collapse, sparked an HOA revolution, and taught me more about structural engineering, property law, and human nature than I ever wanted to know. Not bad for some blown in cellulose. The story has a happy ending, which I'm grateful for. We all could have been hurt. Property could have been destroyed. Instead, problems were identified, repairs were made, bad leadership was removed, and reforms were implemented. The system worked eventually, though it took far more effort than it should have. On quiet evenings, I sit in my living room and appreciate the simple fact of a solid roof over my head. It's something most people take for granted, but I never will again. Every beam, every truss, every square foot of insulation represents a fight I won, a stand I took, and a principle I defended. My home is truly mine now, in a way it wasn't before all this happened. And when new residents move into Meadowbrook, the long-timers tell them the story of the Great Insulation War, as it's come to be known. The details get exaggerated in the retelling, but the core truth remains. One homeowner stood up to an unreasonable HOA, prevented a disaster, and changed the community for the better. That legacy is worth more than any settlement check.